Welcome, guys, back to another episode of Beyond the Logo, where Mike and I talk with exceptional brands that are building true fandom. Mike, how have you been?
Doing well. You doing well?
Nice. I'm doing well. I'm excited about our guest today. This is a longtime friend, longtime organizer here in Atlanta. So today, guest, we have with us Chris Stuckey, and Chris, how you doing today?
Doing fine.
Awesome. It's a hot day in Atlanta, and we recently came off of an amazing event that Chris organizes called MomoCon. So for anyone who's not familiar with MomoCon, let's kick off. What is MomoCon, Chris?
Sure. So, MomoCon is an animation, gaming, and comic convention that takes place every Memorial Day weekend in May here at the Georgia World Congress Center in Atlanta. Most recently, we actually had about 67,000 unique attendees, or more than 180,000 total attendance over the 4 days of the event. So it's a bunch of fans of animation, anime, video games, tabletop games, comic books, and manga that come together 4 days, celebrate. It's all about community passion and excitement for, the latest and greatest of whatever's in the fandom world.
I love it, and I also like how you communicate always both of these numbers because many in the convention space count people differently, and it's
Yeah.
hard to know the scale. Maybe just do a little tangent, give us a 101 on the
Sure.
way people count attendance.
Yeah. So essentially, everybody when they hear an attendance number, they're most often thinking about the number of people in the venue at like one time. Presumably, that's what I think the average person thinks, but it's not often what the events tend to report.
Mm.
So there's different ways of counting. Um, we report both a unique count, which we count as the number of individual badges that have been distributed and given to people. That includes paid badges, but for our count, it also includes if somebody's a speaker and gets a comp badge. So they're still a person, they're still there for all 4 days. Some events choose to have a more strict attendee
Mm.
count, where it's just paid attendance, not even comps. There's very few that do that, but there are some. And then there are other ones that tend to report their what we would call a turnstile count. So if you sell a 4 day badge to one person, they suddenly now become four attendees because it's taking a total day account
Mm.
and putting that total together. And then there's even others still that what they'll do is that they will, and this is more of a major corporate thing. I won't mention the specific events, but they will intentionally limit the number of 4 day badges that they sell and make people buy 4 1 day badges. And now they will report the number of unique badges as a total unique count, but they made people buy 4 badges, so they report a higher number on their unique attendance because of that.
Got it. Wow. Stats.
The
games.
Yeah.
The games. So you have clearly grown to something that every way you count it is now a very large number of real humans showing up together around a shared passion. And but it started pretty modestly at the I think Georgia Tech campus,
Yeah.
basically. Just tell us a little bit about that growth and the time it's taken and just that journey.
So MomoCon was started by Jessica Merriman on the Georgia Tech campus. At the time, she was president of the Georgia Tech anime club, anime and video game club called Anime Otaku. For those in the know, Tech, Georgia Tech, and the word otaku is the combination there of otaku, kind of a
Mm.
pun on that. And so that club had existed for a while, but Jess is the one that put together the idea of having the club put together an event. So she ran and organized a small team. I was part of the initial team in the first year, but I was part of the organizing committee that year and put it together and maybe had 15 people putting together the event. And all the way back in 2005. And, we had about 700 or so people that came out to
Mm.
that event. It was small, it was 2 days at the Student Center, the old Student Center at Georgia Tech. And then over the next several years, it kind of doubled in attendance for several years in a row. So it went to like 1,400 to more than 28, nearly 3,000 actually. And so basically, we had a lot of initial growth on the campus at Georgia Tech. But the campus got a little frustrated because when we got to around 10,000 people, they're like, there's a lot of non-students here.
Mm.
And we were on the spring break weekend, and like, why do you have all these people coming to campus? They didn't really understand it. And so we were basically kind of forced out. So we moved off campus. That changed our business structure quite a lot. We had moved to the hotels in 2012. So 2012 would be the first year in the hotel. We're at the Marriott Marquis, and then we were at the Hilton Atlanta, and then we were at both. And then we needed even more space, and the Marriott was like, hey, we're not going to give you any more space. So we were like, well, we'll look at the Congress Center. And all of a sudden, as soon as we started talking at the Congress Center, they had plenty of space at the Marquee,
Mm.
but it was already getting too late. And so in 2015, we moved to the Georgia World Congress Center, and we've been there ever since.
Wow, amazing. So from approximately 700 to bumping up against 70,000, I guess,
Yeah.
would be the apples to apples. Nice. Um, what do you think for people that maybe haven't been to this sort of fan con? What is something that people misunderstand around why people would come to an event like this?
Well, I'll put it in context for those that probably are, fans of something, right? Everybody's a fan of something, and right now we are in the middle, as we're recording this, of the FIFA World Cup events,
Yep.
and what we see is a bunch of people coming together. They wear costumes, they come together, and they celebrate something as a group, and that group aspect. There's watch parties here around the facility. There's ones all around downtown Atlanta. There's so many different watch parties all occurring around these matches. And people have an amazing time because they're around other people that share that interest, that passion. Even if it's just a watch party for a few hours, there's like a connection that they have with other people. That's why they wear a costume. Their costume says, I am a fan of this team. And so it's very similar in the world of, anime gaming fandom.
Mm.
You really love a show, the latest anime, and you feel like the character is one that you like or represents you in some aspect. And you want to show other people that by wearing this costume, you are a fan of this show. And then you can talk to other people that are also fans of that show and have other people say, "Oh, amazing costume! It's amazing what you've done with your cosplay and build out this character." You like, and so they get together, and even at our show, people will obviously have the same character, and then all of the same character get together in a photo shoot, and there's kind of like a big celebration of that as well. And so when we look at MomoCon or other fan conventions, it's really just an assembly of a lot of different, essentially soccer teams
Mm.
for different fandoms, different aspects of fandom that all come together to find people that share a passion together, and they ultimately are celebrating that in a way that they can't do online or can't do just on their own, especially as you get older. I'm an older millennial. You can't find people to hang out as easily once you're out of school. So how do you do that? Well, a lot of people do that at fandom conventions.
I love it. So I like your collection of soccer team costume
Yeah.
analogy. I mean, Mike, obviously you've done a lot of work from sports translating into this more cultural fandom. Does this resonate with stuff you've seen in the
No, I
survey
mean
and others?
absolutely. It's you end up hitting on all the. I mean, there's pretty significant differences between sports and
Hmm.
really any cultural
Mm-hmm.
category. One of the things I thought was interesting was when you're talking about how great your costume is. Part of the story is always going to be about hierarchy. And again, hierarchy has a bad connotation to
Hmm.
it, but that's a real part of having a vibrant subculture, right? That there's almost a ladder to climb, and so it's absolutely fascinating stuff. And look, the other thing that really kind of hit with me, this collection of things. The fact that you're not just look, they're all watching soccer. You got anime, you got games, which is an interesting aspect to add to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, crossing all these cultures and worlds.
And
So,
and I want to add one correction too on anime. A lot of
mm,
people view anime as a monolith. They think it's like one
mm,
thing, and it's really a diverse set of different interests. You have people who are very, very passionate about specific shows, specific genres, even specific characters, and then you have characters that are more appealing to women, characters that are more appealing to men. You have, the popular mainstream, hits that go on. Many people are aware of Dragon Ball Z and things like that. It had broad appeal. So a lot of people just view it as a monolith, or itself being a genre. a lot of people say anime is a genre when it's really a collection of sci-fi, fantasy, different kind of tropes within anime that have their own genre that are unique to anime. But it's actually very diverse, and I want to
That's
make sure that we talk about that at least a little bit.
that's fascinating. I often am, espousing the same thing when it comes to gaming or the gamer, and they're as diverse as the movieer, and
Well, you could say the same thing about
same
sports.
thing
Yeah.
for sports. Yeah, different demographics. So
Yeah.
great. So I guess just going off of that a little bit, you have these different demographics and interest, even just within anime, and then you also have gaming and
Yeah.
other cosplay, maybe adjacent, but you're bringing them an experience that continues to grow. So I guess how do you think about balancing the specificity of interest and what's really common enough where they all show up?
Yeah, so it's important, especially we're entering an age where authenticity is a topic that we often refer to being a requirement of Gen Alpha. That whole community requires authenticity. And I think that existed even with the millennials and whatnot. They want something that feels like it's not some shell that doesn't understand them. Like this is like, oh, you don't understand me kind of situation, and that's what happens when a lot of brands suddenly jump into fandom.
Mm.
They do it half-heartedly. They don't quite understand it. And what they do when they do this is they often create an inauthentic experience. So when somebody is a fan comes, they're like, this is not representing the fandom that I know. And that's a thing that has hurt shows when they attempt to jump in, especially like bigger companies when they put together an anime section in the event. It doesn't really feel right to the anime fans that show up, so they don't show up again the next year. So when we jump back to MomoCon and what our experience is important to create an experience that it reflects the audience and reflects the audience of the time. It is not stuck with, we started in 2005. Fandom itself has evolved until our most recent event in 2026. So we have to always be aware of what it means to be an authentic fan of anime, of games at any given time. And what that means is understanding what people are interested in and working with the fandom groups. Like we will work with kind of like, if you could imagine, there's a thing called Gundams, which are these giant mech
Mm.
figures that are in anime, but they're also in toys. And many years ago, we coordinated with local builders of Gundam models and worked together to introduce that section of content within MomoCon to create an authentic experience that was representative of that very niche fandom. And we've continued to grow what we call the Gundam build area within MomoCon over the many years. And that started by connecting with an actual group that understands it, as opposed to an approach that's often very corporate. Oh, this is popular. I understand it enough that I'm going to make a Gundam build area, and they don't come at it from an authentic way. And that's kind of what we've done. You just put that across like 100 different things, and that's how MomoCon has grown over the years. Is we connect with the audience, we understand what the subject matter is in the way that the fans understand it, and we make sure to represent an authentic experience for that group.
I think that's super valuable advice to anyone building in this space.
No, I get
So
the sense that's easy for you. You've been doing this since 2005, probably long before that.
Well, certainly I was a fan
Yeah.
before that, and I didn't expect when I went to Georgia Tech. I was studying computer science. I wasn't expecting to end up in a career of doing events. That was unexpected. But I was a fan. My first fandom was actually Star Trek,
mm,
and I played a lot of video games. But I wouldn't even account when I played video games that being a fandom at the time. It was just like, oh, I played at the time I had an NES and then Super NES and then so on. I had every Nintendo system basically, but I wouldn't have called that a fandom until more recently. It felt like there was now an identity behind playing Nintendo games as I got older. Like, oh, these games are different than the Dreamcast games or the Sony games. Oh, it's a Nintendo fan,
But do you
right?
think it was always there? You just didn't articulate
I
it?
think when I was younger, it didn't really feel as resonant. Maybe
Okay.
because I wasn't as social and I wasn't necessarily looking for that social aspect in that fandom. It wasn't until later, perhaps when I went around college, that it really mattered a bit more to me. Although, technically, I guess, now that I think about it, I was writing for video game journalism sites back before when I was in high school, even, which were reviewing games and talking about different things. And so I guess there was a connection and desire for social outreach at the time as well.
I mean, and again, sorry, but
Yeah.
your era in the gaming was playing on a console, so not connected with
Yeah.
others on the internet, right?
Yeah, I mean, although so I mentioned Star Trek being a first
Mm.
fandom. There was a game called Star Trek Armada that was a kind of social outreach. People could compete online against other people in that game. It was kind of a real-time strategy game built around the Star Trek universe. I got so into that that I joined a mod team that made a custom builds of that game, and I made custom maps in that game, and that was how got introduced to a lot of the community around it. So I will say that gaming became social pretty early on. When the internet started introducing and the idea of reaching out to the internet, historically there was MUDs and there was other things even before that were all about gaming. Almost started socially on as soon as the internet was around, and so I wouldn't say that I was exclusive to that, but I would definitely agree that consoles were my introduction, which was a very solo experience, except for bring your friends over. They bring a copy of the game. Let's go ahead and play WrestleMania. That was one of the games that I remember playing a lot of back in the day with my friends. They'd brought it over. I didn't own a copy, and that was people came over to your house for that. You know.
And I love, I mean, that tie-in for modding, which is kind of niche, but within the game industry, the idea that you're taking a game you're a fan of, and now you are creating your own experience within that, which I
Yep.
think is a common DNA of those of us who build communities, because you're just like, yeah, I'm going to stay within this universe, but I'm going to contribute something new, just the way a
Yeah.
cosplayer might do when they
Exactly.
show up at MomoCon. So, was there anything as you scaled from 700 to 70,000 almost, and you're trying to maintain authenticity, any times looking back where you feel like you were close to losing your way or did lose your way?
Well, so there was a lot of like transition points. I mentioned from college to hotel. There was a transition where we had to make sure that we kept the feeling of it because it was on campus, it was in buildings, it was in a different environment. How do we keep that feeling in a way that people want and expect? There were people that would say, "Oh, I really miss the Georgia Tech days." People would say, "Oh, there's something about that environment that people like." So we were worried that we couldn't translate that into audience interest during that phase. So that was probably our first real like, oh, how do we do this? And so it was about you know trying to go from a school environment that was very open to somehow providing that open feeling inside of a hotel.
Mm.
And that was like distributing things in different areas, providing common spaces, and it was very intentional in our structure on how we do it. And the event, and even the venue that we chose, was really important for us in that same regard. So that was our first transition point. And then when we went from hotel, after we successfully did that, to the convention center, which convention centers are usually viewed more sterile. They're not. They're they're just like big concrete blocks. They're not interesting. And usually a hotel at least has different features and it feels like not a concrete square. So for the Congress Center, we had to do the same thing, figure out how to make it not feel like a concrete box. And so we put all these things around the building, arcades, activities, and that was when we really expanded the activities and the content, and we expanded the amount of artwork that we put, the
Mm.
banners and signs, just to cover up walls, make it feel more connected space, make it feel more part of the community. And those were really important aspects. And one other thing I'll touch on along the way, we were always trying to maintain relevancy as the fandom evolved. And there was a point at which that we had discovered that there was this thing called YouTubers. We were there at the point that started becoming an actual thing, but we were pretty early on in realizing that people followed these guys in a way that they would come to an event because that YouTuber was coming to an event. And so we noticed that when we went to the Minecraft convention run by Mojang in Orlando, Florida. We went down, checked it out, and we realized that almost everybody that was at Minecon was there because of Sky Does Minecraft or one of the other variety of people. So we were like, we got to get Sky Does Minecraft to come to MomoCon, and that was a mistake. We got people to come because Sky Does Minecraft was
Mm.
there, but it was an example of creating an authentic experience for the Minecraft fans because we didn't have the breadth of Minecraft
Mm.
specific content that fan community was looking for, and that was a kind of a wake up call for us in how we created an experience. Like we were doing the corporate thing I just mentioned before. This is popular. Let's just bring in the popular guy, and then we learned that was not the right way to go about it.
That's a super valuable lesson and timely, I think, influencer marketing, working with creators. It is continuing to get so much marketing dollars
Yeah.
increasing, and because many people are seeing results when they do it the right way. But that's like a really valuable touch point for everyone. And it also hits on that status. I mean, if you do it the right way, to your point, Mike, with hierarchies, there's these parasocial relationships. People show up because
Yep.
someone is famous, and I know you now still are leaning into some of those areas, but surrounding it with other
Yeah.
experiences, right?
Yeah, you're right. So every fan convention brings in celebrity guests. Now, the celebrity, for people that are not in fandom, may not be anybody. They were not going to recognize them on the street. They're not going to know who they are from the next person. But to the people that care about that person or that character that they voice or created or however they're related to it, that means the world to them to connect with that character, that fan is now connecting with the character, not the voice actor, in many ways. So it's kind of like a way to suddenly interact with the show. That's kind of how people view connecting with the voice actor, because then they say something like the character says in the character's voice, and now they've brought the character into the real world, and that's a really special moment for fans.
Love it. Let's stick on this more, I guess, general topic of fandom. Mike has a whole book about fandom and a framework. But in your mind, when you think about a fan as distinct from a customer, I guess, what are some of the things that come to your mind there?
Well, so I guess customers maybe is in the Venn diagram of fans. Not every customer of MomoCon is a fan.
Mm-hmm.
There's people that come for business reasons. There's people that
Mm-hmm.
come because they bring their kids. There's customers,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the people that are part of the subculture that our show represents, either anime, gaming, comics. And there's also what we would might call more casual fans, and they're kind of maybe I would call maybe even a third group there. They're not fully invested in fandom, but they're on the periphery of it.
Mm.
They have an interest. They want to learn more. It's kind of like an intro to fandom. So there are a lot of people that come in that maybe they're in the transition point. If you think about it from a marketing funnel, they started as a customer. They came to our event because they had some interest, and then they got to connect with other fans, and they moved down the funnel, and now they are connected in a way that they really loved this thing they saw at our show. Now they get more invested. Uh, I won't mention the name, but there was a specific person that works at like Dragon Con that didn't know anything about anime really at all. Then MomoCon and Dragon Con partnered, and they came to our show for the first time, and then they really loved anime after that, and they even got like anime tattoos, and they like went down that whole path um, because of they got introduced to it. So there is a way that people that are just like I don't really know about this thing, and then they meet the people that are really excited about it. Then they learn about whatever the fandom is, and then they on their own investigate and dive deeper into the fandom.
Are there things that you have done, plan to do, or you just see done in the space to help with this marketing funnel progression? To see if someone wants to evolve to be a
Well,
deeper fan.
so think about it as well. Just to point out, like there's in a marketing parlance, there's different points of how to introduce somebody to the funnel. For a lot of customers, to use the previous conversation, celebrities are a way of doing that. Oh, I want to meet this person. They're not a huge fan necessarily, but like Patrick Warburton comes to mind. He was a crossover guest. He's a voice actor, did Kronk and Emperor's New Groove, and several other voice acting roles. But he's also Putty on Seinfeld and has face recognizability to some people. So there were people that came because we booked him as a guest,
Mm-hmm.
and there were people within the specific fandom that loved Kronk's voice, and now they can celebrate Emperor's New Groove and meet other people together. So we created that opportunity. So when we bring those in, there's kind of like what we would call introducing them to maybe the top of the funnel because they're the people that have the most casual interest in our event. But now they see the event and they start moving down. But then there's other people that we introduce the Critical Role group this past year. They're a collection of they all come from voice acting and then they got into tabletop role-playing games together, specifically originally D&D. Now they have their own game Daggerheart, and it essentially the people that love them are huge fans of role playing. the people that come out for them, they come out there because they're fans of the show, but they also comes out because they themselves play the game. So now that would call maybe what I would call maybe a mid-funnel introduction. We drop people in, they're already in fandom, they're already engaged, and then we've got kind of maybe the very kind of very bottom of the funnel where we're already they're already kind of transitioned to a full-on fan customer, and those type of people will usually come because they're involved in the community aspects. They're not only are they a fan, they're inside of a fan group that maybe does panels or content, or they're somehow integrated so deeply within fandom that they are an expert in that specific genre, whether that they come as part of an official capacity or even on their own or unofficial capacity. Mentioning influencers, many of them are fans in business, and they go to an event to MomoCon because it helps them with reaching more audience and also creating an authentic experience for people watching their content. So I'd say they're pretty far down in the
They're
funnel as well.
probably participating. They might
Yeah,
be creating, whether they're making it a business or doing it out of
yeah,
passion, right? They're
yeah.
actually creating their own stuff. Nice, nice. Um, Very good. Anything else around, I guess, the theme of belonging before we turn to scale? Because you mentioned a lot of deliberate decisions around the physical venue, going from the coziness of tech and keeping the physical venue comfortable and belonging and cool, I guess. Anything else that comes to mind around just this theme of belonging, separate from the venue design?
Well, so there's always a culture in every organization. MomoCon is an organization that has this most recent year we had you know 1,300 volunteers,
Mm.
and that has built up over 20 years, and that is itself creating a feeling of belonging because it's a mutual thing that all these people can do together. That structure that we built was because we're all fans, and then we became friends because we worked through the challenge of building this event together, and then we got to know each other. Many of our volunteers, are close personal friends. We hang out outside the show. Many of the volunteers met their significant others as a result of being a volunteer and being part of the community, because that's a community within the community of MomoCon, and it's a very kind of like how to say, it's a community that loves celebrating fandom by helping others engage with fandom,
Mm.
right? And so pretty much all of the volunteers are themselves fans, but they somehow want to get more involved, and one of the ways to do that is through being a part of the event itself. And there's a culture. I mean, people like volunteering for a show. They get something out of that volunteering experience, and that was through very deliberate cultural aspects that we had from Jess and myself, how we approach it, how we are always talking to people and not talking to people. That mattered a lot because it meant having an equal engagement with people as opposed to just telling people this is what you need to do and then being very corporate about it. It's we don't have a corporate structure. We have a very open structure, and we're very approachable, and we intentionally do that, and that creates an environment where I think with our volunteers we are an authentic fun time for them in their own way that they want to engage with fandom.
Yeah, that's how as you've scaled, and that is a lot of volunteers. How do you tend to get the next number of new volunteers? Is it friends telling friends, or how does that tend to grow
It's
tactically?
it's mostly friends telling
Hmm.
friends, but there are people that come because they volunteer at other events and they want to check out our event. And the way that they've started engaging with fan conventions is by being involved in the fan event running community. So we'll have people that come from Washington D.C.'s convention scene, check out our event, and they'll volunteer
Mm.
because they've been a part of that. And there's something interesting that I've also noticed as an anecdote. Some longtime people, when you get into volunteering for events, and it changes how an event feels to you when you go to one, you start noticing things differently. Oh, this line's bad organized, and oh man, I can't believe they did this thing, or and even the average volunteer starts noticing things, and so it changes the way that you view an event that you wouldn't have noticed as just an attendee, because you now have some inside knowledge, and that gives you maybe a hierarchy, to use the term you were talking about early, in how they engage with it. They now know something that the average fan doesn't because they've seen behind the curtains on how events run, and now they notice things like line management in a way that they didn't think about it in the way before.
That's great. Yeah, are there any cases of, I guess, you as an event organizer benefiting from, a best practice or horrible practice that a volunteer had at a different event that you were able to
Well,
integrate in and improve?
I mean, we have DragonCon here in
Yes.
Atlanta, and DragonCon has been around longer. They're actually celebrating their 40th year this year. So 40 years of DragonCon. And they started actually as a group called the Dragon Server back in the 80s. That was a collection of fans getting together to talk on message servers. And then they decided as a message server to get together and hold an event. And that was actually a really fascinating experience. And so they started growing fandom at the one of the earlier stages of fandom. They were one of the earlier events in the fandom world. Not the earliest, but they were the earliest that's still around in Atlanta. And over the years, they built up a community of fans that understood things. Like some of our first, we have a team of volunteers called Tech Ops. Tech Ops help run audio video equipment at the show. And they're volunteers and they'll engage with the equipment. But there's a certain, you can't just have anybody engage with the equipment. You have to have some knowledge of what you're doing. DragonCon built up a volunteer base of Tech Ops volunteers, and so our first Tech Ops volunteers had also volunteered at DragonCon. So they came in fully aware of how to operate with some of the equipment. So that's an example of like kind of how there's a lot of crossover, cross pollination between the events.
Yeah, I mean, what I kind of hear about all this is it's all about relationship and community building,
Yeah.
right? You let them engage, you let them interact. I mean, I shouldn't say let them. It naturally occurs, so they get something out of it,
Hmm.
right? So there's a real world community part added to the love of the shared interests, and so
Yeah.
it's a virtuous cycle. It's
I
beautiful.
think it's interesting just that volunteer motivation, and there's probably some element, although it sounds like for this community it's the lesser element of maybe just professional development, and this might lead to a job, and there's probably always some of that, but it sounds like, you correct me, the biggest motivation is just the chance to share the love and connect with other people that are really into this particular anime or this particular video game. Would you say
Yeah.
that's an accurate characterization? Why
Yeah,
people there?
it is an accurate characterization. There's most of the people that are doing the volunteer work, many of them maybe have a professional career in something that's similar or in the same line, and that's the reason they jumped into that. But that they chose to jump into that. It wasn't like they were told to go into this. They chose to do that because that's how they wanted to engage with other people. Because it's about community building, and the deliberate decisions that a volunteer makes is often joining a group because they want to engage with other people in this way. They want to, like the Tech Ops volunteers, to bring that back. They understand how tech works. They want to engage because they're big fans of X, Y, and Z. And then they join a community of people that also understand tech and are also fans of that. And that just further solidifies a strong, almost familial bond, because they have all the types of things that when you count somebody as family, that is not genetically family. They have shared struggles, they have shared interests, and they have shared common goals. So those are all things that a volunteer within the space, they join, and now they're part of a very tight knit community, and that a lot of people really want that. A lot of people, especially again talking as an older millennial, as you get older, it gets even harder to be a part of those communities. You tend to become more isolated as you get older, and this is a way that a lot of people engage and become more open to social engagement and connection and the familial bond.
Makes a lot of
I
sense.
would want to add something to that. It's because as you talk about volunteers, especially the last few years, Atlanta has hosted every major sports event, and I will get emails from the position I have seeking out
Hmm.
volunteers, and so it really is this. There's something about these products that have, let's say, precisely cultural meaning that people want to touch, that people aspire to touch those groups and to be a part of those groups. And I think that's an important distinction in all this. You got to have cultural meaning to get the volunteers out, to get them to want to be part of the community.
It's a great point. I mean, when I go back to '96, I was here when Atlanta hosted the Olympics, and to your point, it was the Olympics. It was coming to our city. There was some benefit of a couple free tickets. It was pretty modest, though. It was mostly, and in that time, I had to put in, I don't know, something like 100 hours of community service just to be eligible
To
to
see a swim
volunteer.
meet.
To see for me, it was table tennis. Honestly, it was like I
Yeah.
love freaking table
Yeah.
tennis, and I got to be the scorekeeper and be right
That's
there,
cool.
and it was totally worth it. But
Yeah.
it was a lot of work, and it
Mhm.
was because I wanted to be part of that cultural moment.
If we go back and watch any '96 tabletop tennis, are we going to see you flipping the
You
scoreboard in
may
any
you
videos?
you may actually see me. Yes,
Hair down to your shoulders.
I was there for the finals. Maybe a little more of a fro than down. All right, let's transition a little bit into lessons for brands that might be watching. Let's say there's a Fortune 500 company. They've heard anime is a thing. They're not deep in the culture. They've heard about MomoCon or a similar convention out there that gets a lot of people there. What are some high level do's or don'ts around how they would partner with an event organizer like you and show up there? And again, this is a non endemic
Yeah.
brand that just wants to reach that community.
So, in my experience of running MomoCon, I often go to a lot of other events. So I'll travel. I'm traveling in a few weeks to San Diego Comic Con. I go to New York Comic Con. I go to a lot of events. Before COVID, I would even go to about 25 events every year. So
Well,
about half of the year was spent traveling to an event. So I have a lot of experience seeing how different brands engage at different events. Not every event I went to was a fandom event, mind you, but just trying to learn from the event business. And and there was a very common theme. There's a lot of brands that show up and they're non-endemic. They don't understand the audience, and they think they'll slap their logo on something that the audience cares about at the event, and then that's a value to them. Throw a logo. That's where it ends. Um, and you'll see that is still common to this day. Often just a logo. They don't take the extra step necessary to actually make the fans feel like they are part of the brand is a part of their community. There are brands that I can kind of talk about that have done some success. I'll give you an example. There was a Red Peg marketing agency that worked with Geico and specifically around integrating Geico into gaming. So they didn't just put the Geico logo, they made a pixelated Geico logo and they made a pixelated gecko. And they came out and they brought gaming consoles to the show floor. They gave away free swag that was all gaming related, some things that were specific to gaming. And they didn't make a hard sales pitch on insurance. They just said, Geico's here, we're celebrating gaming, come and check it out. And they didn't make a hard sales pitch. They didn't do that.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Was that a multi-year investment?
Red Peg built up and did this for multiple years. I know this because I talked to them, trying to get them to come to MomoCon. They did 1 year, but I actually learned from them as a side note. Uh, Georgia is a difficult market for car insurance. Apparently, we don't drive super great here, so
hmm,
there's ebbs and flows about how much they're going to do investment
it's funny.
into different regional markets. And so Geico, stopped doing that campaign within gaming, but it was a multi-year thing, and they built it up, and they understood better, and they understood what was popular, and they tried to integrate with like specific games that were relevant as opposed to just a video game. And there's another example of a marketing agency here in Atlanta. I forget the name of the agency off the top of my head, but they worked with Arby's, which again also based in Atlanta, or at least the corporate headquarters based in Atlanta. And they made a campaign where they would take Arby's boxes and Arby's kind of ingredients, condiments, and other aspects, and build out custom anime characters or cosplay out of the Arby's boxes. And they would put these videos online, back on Twitter, and they would have a build session, or they would show it in movement. And it was a very effective way for Arby's to have reached fan community because they felt seen. A big brand, everybody's heard of Arby's. Now Arby's is doing something that's specific to anime.
Yeah,
And and the last thing I want to mention, how does it tie in? Because your question was how does that tie into a convention or event? So if a brand wants to come into a fan convention, I think what's really key is coming in a way that says you understand the fandom, because you're not It's not like a traditional sports thing, but even in traditional sports, you'll find that Coca-Cola has Coke blasted over everything, which is in itself obviously a reference to the goal in the soccer fandom that soccer fans are aware of. So the extra O's and things like that in the branding is a way that Coke and their marketing can say, we understand soccer fans, we understand some phrasing within that community, and they plaster it all over the World Cup areas. So when a Coke wants to come into MomoCon, and their agencies technically have, but they haven't done what I would call gone the extra mile of trying to integrate. They haven't, introduced something that fans say, well, Coke understands this fandom in the same way that they've done for soccer. I think there's opportunity. And I think a big brand like Coke doesn't necessarily have to, but I think if Coke were to, or the agencies representing Coke were to, they would find even greater engagement.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So using the language or symbolism of the fandom to say we understand and we have done some homework
Yeah.
and we're showing up in a way that makes sense. And then you also mentioned, I mean, it's almost a cheat code, but giving value to the community. I feel like certainly
Yeah.
this is a community that before you are trying to sell something, you're giving back an experience or swag or
Yeah.
digital codes or custom items. So yeah, I think that's really very good advice there. So, um, what what about? Do you have any thoughts on this same Fortune 500 company that's trying to build fandom for their own brand? You know, they're hiring you as a consultant. You built MomoCon. They're not in the geek fandom space. They just sell widgets. Are there any like universal principles that you feel apply?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of psychology in how you build fandom. I was talking about Nintendo earlier in this conversation. Nintendo built a fandom out of what is essentially a product. So they made a product and they had competitors in that product. Now, if, for example, there was only Nintendo and no Sony, there was no Sega, I don't know if there would have been a Nintendo fandom. I think part of the ingredients is the fact that there was competition, and to use again the term hierarchy, I like Nintendo. Nintendo, in my opinion, is better than a PlayStation, or the other way around. And now, psychologically, you've recommitted that Nintendo is a superior product because I have a competition or comparison point in Sony. And then Sony fans and then no, I like Sony more than I like Nintendo. Now, you've got camps, and now you've got this competition and things like that. Now, not every competitive brand, there's different deodorant brands, but I don't see any,
Hmm.
men's Dove deodorant brand going against the Old Spice deodorant brand and saying I'm that. But there, for all we know, there may be some really dedicated deodorant fans out there. I don't know, but that is maybe part of the ingredients, but it needs to be something more. There needs to be a way to engage with the product on a regular basis. It can't be uh, pure consumable. Now, there are Coke fans. There are some people that swear by Cokes
Hmm.
that are consumable.
Yep.
But that, I think, has more to do with just psychology and brand loyalty in the same way that we tend to stick with brands that we buy. And as a result, somebody asks you. See, it's. I think this is the inflection point on turning somebody into a fan. You have to be asked, "Do you like this thing?" And now you think, "I guess I do like this thing." And then now it'll come up that in your day-to-day environment that you'll engage and then realize, "I like this thing." So maybe I don't like this other thing. Maybe I don't like Pepsi. There's people that say I like both, but then people are like, "You can't like both." And now you've got a challenge, and so it's changed this thing in your brain, and it switched it into now maybe I am a fan, and now you have to put your foot down. And so when a brand Fortune 500 comes in and wants to make a fandom out of their product, I think maybe one of the ingredients is you have to have and exemplify the differences in your product compared to somebody else's, and you have to create a reason that people are going to compare the two.
Some tension that allows the person to potentially recommit or
Yeah,
or commit. Yeah.
You'd say it's a in group versus an out group,
yeah,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
You gotta have a rival. I mean, it's a great point, and especially when you start to think about it, it's like the Dallas Cowboys have the Philadelphia Eagles, the Cubs have the Cardinals, and you go to the brand space, and you got well, Coke and Pepsi have a problem with each other,
Hmm.
but it's relatively rare.
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep. No, I
Uh,
like that.
there's even people online that'll joke about FedEx and UPS having fights all the time because the trucks show up at the same place. People make up the narratives even if the brands don't always explore that.
Yeah, that's super smart.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because marketers have tremendous fear of negative advertising.
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, and again, this rivalry concept is really a very it's a powerful thing, and again, it's very very rare.
We certainly have it in politics.
Yeah.
I mean, there's yeah, there's sometimes there's that. Well, let's transition a little bit to the future of fandom. Put on our get in front of the crystal ball. Um, I have a point of view on this, but in terms of just physical events, how do you see the next 5 to 10 years evolving in the event space broadly?
So there's a few challenges that the event space is having in a post-COVID world. It's not going to be a surprise to anybody to learn that we're in a period of been in a period of inflation and its costs have been going up. So unfortunately, events have had really serious inflation within the hotel industry. There's a lot of factors in that. So a lot of hotel costs have gone up. A lot of services-based costs have gone up. So, if we look at MomoCon 2019 costs, even on a per hour basis or per, unit basis, it's 50 to 200% higher on almost every single category compared to 2019 for the same relative thing. So, more than general inflation prices. So, it's really hard to start an event now because it requires so much more physical capital to start an event. And if you're a bigger company that is in the event world, you look at that and say, I don't know if I want to make the financial investment to start a new event. Uh, what they might do instead, and what we are seeing, is a period of consolidation. The brands are saying, well, this is already a successful event. How do we make that event our event? So you're seeing a lot of events that are independent events being purchased or conglomerated, or one way or another, they are, the bigger companies, as opposed to making new events, want to focus on those events. So we're seeing this consolidation, and we're seeing it difficult for the events pipeline to get started because it's harder now for an individual like myself to say, I want to do an event. Let's put together a hotel on a weekend. Now that's costing a lot more. It keeps it out of reach for a lot of people. And I think that events pipeline is actually a very healthy thing. And it's unfortunate that we don't have that.
Mm.
We don't have these new events starting that, can maybe pop up around events. Years ago, just as a side note, there was 221B Con here in Atlanta that celebrated the Sherlock Holmes fandom when the BBC Sherlock Holmes show with Benedict Cumberbatch aired. That was a very niche thing, but there was people that got together for a weekend to celebrate that, uh, and that couldn't happen today, at least not easily, because the fandom that is small can't make that kind of their own event. They can't celebrate fandom in that same way. They have to find other ways to do it. So we're going to see groups like that maybe be a part of existing fan groups, fan events, and they'll probably see events like a Comic Con add in more things as they become popular that are smaller or niche than they do right now. And I think the other thing that we're seeing is that there is a trend where during COVID everybody went online, and a lot of the younger groups, the Gen Alphas, Gen Zs, really started disliking the online world to some extent, and they wanted something that was physical in nature. That so they have been seeking out more in-person experiences than they were previously. I think being online too much all the time means that they want to find a way to engage with somebody in the real world, and we're seeing fan interest and growth in a younger generation, younger segments in fan events. Some people are finding their own events and own event spaces specifically with that younger generation in mind. But a lot of times they're joining the existing events like MomoCon because they want to meet other people and even though they're 10, 12, they might years ago it might have been that they hit 17 or 16 or 17 before they really go to an event between their parents and all the other factors that keep the younger audience away. We're seeing more younger audience, parents are also wanting their kids to engage socially more in real world, So we're seeing younger audience coming into the fandom world as another thing. So trend lined, we'll probably see that continue for a while.
I agree. Yeah, two quick add-ons. One, loved Sherlock. Sorry that didn't
Yeah,
happen. I would have been there if I knew.
yeah.
Two, got to plug our spot here at Resurgence Center because for anyone out there that has a great event idea and the hotel's too expensive, if you're in that startup mode, hundreds to couple thousand, we got a great venue, very affordable. Got to get that plug in. We'd love to see more events sprout here in Atlanta and build the fandom culture. Um, one additional future question because it's 2026, so we have to say AI or we won't be discoverable out there on the internet. So, how is AI affecting your business? Do you think it's a positive, a neutral, a negative for the event business? What's your thought?
So one of the things about fandom, and this is true for most types of, fan content. Fan content has been created by human beings that have a strong interest and understanding of the community and world. So when you put together a story, when you draw a character or you do something, there's a humanity behind that. And what we've seen with AI is the introduction of content that's quickly generated, whether that's written or visual. And we've seen a lot of pushback because that also has the potential to displace human created content. So, for example, the Artist Alley is a area of MomoCon that brings in these vendors that create their own artwork and they sell their own artwork at our event. That's all human made content and always what has been. And we try to understand both what the fans that want to buy from the artist, but also what the artists want and understand. And everybody is united around anti AI right now. And part of that started because the artists were earliest to call it out. Well, everybody was having fun playing around with Dolly when it first came out, making images. Artists started putting the call out, hey, I used to get this amount of exposure on Twitter, and my art would get out and it'd get retweeted. Now, there's all this AI generated content that's kind of making it so my new content that I
Mm.
have, my exposure mechanism is now lessened. And you know, also AI was trained on artwork I put on Twitter because they used that same artwork. So now, especially in the earliest versions where it basically just took an existing piece and slightly modified it, and artists were early on to put it out like this is almost a one for one copy of an artist's work. So AI was clearly trained on their art. So the artists are understandably very insulted and frustrated by this because they had no control, no say over this. And so that, even though it was earliest on in the earliest versions of Dolly, everybody knows now that the current AI has been trained on all the artwork that was put out online. So now there's this understanding within the fandom that the artists and the creators, their work was taken and without permission and was used to build these models that's now competing against them for this art. And the fandom community is very much understanding this
Mm.
and does not like this. And so AI and anti-AI is a very key part of fandom
Mm.
because it nobody wants AI to replace human created thing. I don't think even AI advocates are saying that they want AI to replace human creativity. Most people would say it complements it.
Yep.
But the artists don't feel that way. And the fans that follow the artists and the creators don't feel that way. So I would say that AI has impacted fandom in a very specific way, and it's created in some ways a unifying force around the artists. It's helped people realize that the artists are potentially a threat. This thing that they enjoy, maybe that isn't going to be around because the artists need to make a living with their art, and now that might become more challenging.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's going to be interesting to watch. It is another us versus them framing potentially.
Yeah.
That
Well, it
that brings people
emboldens
together.
people to
Right.
to
Yep.
feel like I've committed to this. And then if you are in the pro AI camp within fandom, there is a pushback in the in-group out-group aspect, and the pushback is understandable. For the I wanted to mention MomoCon we have explicitly prevented and go through the process of preventing AI art from being sold in the artist alley. You know, because people don't want that. The artists don't want to have to compete against that. It's also against the idea of what it means to be in the art community, to use a tool to create art.
Yep.
Even if you've modified it from the AI creation, there is this feeling of inauthenticity
Yep.
that is done by using those tools.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And
I would
and
guess
I was just gonna
the
say I could see another alternate festival,
Yeah.
sprout up that's all about AI art, right? I mean, just as to take kind of the other community out there,
Yeah.
right? Maybe there's an opportunity
this
there.
is more of a different question. I would guess the fanfic community
Mm.
or communities probably have a different relationship with AI, where they're both, they don't want to replace the art of the writing, but it also opens it up to now everyone can do this.
So, yes and no. There are AI driven tools that will make custom fan fiction stories. And just to briefly describe the context for those that are less aware, fan fiction has a long history. It's one of the earliest parts of fan expression. People put together, I think one of the earliest known ones is the Spock Kirk fandom. The idea that the two characters could be romantically involved
Yep.
existed in the 70s and 80s as that Star Trek fandom is one of the earliest outreaches. So people put the stories together that obviously weren't real stories, and that community went online first. They were one of the first communities to go online, sharing the stories they wrote on fanfiction.net and things like that. So these communities that share these stories that involve characters that they don't necessarily own or have any rights to, for those that don't know, the Twilight group had a fan fiction following that actually led to 50 Shades of Grey, because the person wrote it based on the characters from Twilight, and then they ended up having a fan fiction turned into, it had to be custom made back from the original story to that. So there is an idea, to your point, that I really like the story. I want to see what happens if the two characters get together or whatever. That's a very common fan fiction trope. These two characters aren't together in the novel. AI, write me a way to do that. That's not part of the fan fiction community. That's part of an individual user's decision to say, I want to see this story.
Mm.
They're not necessarily like, so there's definitely people that are commercializing AI written fan fiction content. There's My wife reads a lot of books on Kindle Unlimited. A lot of books on Kindle Unlimited are credited, rather AI created, and they're not always indicated as such, but you can kind of tell when you start diving into the story. This little circular. So there is a lot of content created, but the fan fiction community has, and I do know this, the same resilience against AI
Mm.
in part of the communities. And if they recognize that the story was created by such and such author using AI, there's pushback.
Mm. Yeah.
Well,
Interesting.
and to be honest with you, I'm almost thinking more of the intermediate case,
Yeah.
right, where it's, in some sense, using Grammarly can facilitate writing. And so
Yeah.
it's like there's
Sliding
because I
scale there.
suspect that this is
Yeah.
what we're
Yeah.
moving to, where it
Yeah.
accelerates production.
Yep. Yep.
I think most people wouldn't have complained about Grammarly years ago.
Yeah.
When Grammarly dived deep into the AI branding, people started to.
Yep.
Even though the tool might have not changed too much underlying, it's about the in-group out-group thing again.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's conversations hitting every industry with similar themes. So, all right, well, let's hit some rapid fire ones,
Okay.
Chris. So, try to constrain yourself to a single sentence.
That's hard.
I know, but we're going for it. What is the biggest misconception about geek culture?
I think the biggest misconception is that people that are in the geek culture have no social skills.
What is the most underrated part of MomoCon?
I think the most underrated part is honestly going to be about, I'm going to go with this, our line management.
Okay, got it. What's the biggest mistake brands make when trying to build fandom?
I think the biggest mistake is that they throw a lot of money into something without understanding it.
What is one MomoCon attendee story you'll never forget?
Hmm. So I think one of my favorite stories comes from a mother who brought her daughter and bought some fake tickets, and she was really frustrated, and our team didn't know how to handle it. So they brought me in, and we gave her some tickets, and then she sent me a very nice email later on because she got kind of, you know, messed up from that, and we made it good, and she had an amazing experience with her daughter.
That's amazing. What's one prediction about fandom that might sound a little crazy today, but you believe will happen?
I think the craziest thing that we're going to see in fandom is there's going to be a new way to interact with the content. I mean, I don't want to say VR or anything like that, but I think we're going to find a new mechanism of interacting. It might be AR components, it might be something like that. I think we're going to find fandom being introduced into the real world in the near future.
Awesome. All right, final question, Chris. Please finish the sentence. People become fans when.
Uh, when they find something about the content that they truly love and they resonate with.
Amazing. Well, thanks, Chris, for a great conversation. I guess, are there any plugs that you want to put out there? I know you're involved with upcoming Dragon Con as well, so
Yeah.
whether you want to hit that or anything else as final words.
Yeah. So honestly, just to give some shout outs to DragonCon, they mentioned a few times we have a partnership with them. They are on Labor Day weekend. They helped create the fandom community here in Atlanta, and MomoCon's growth is in large part due to the existence of the DragonCon community. So definitely a shout out to DragonCon. And we have a charity event coming up on the weekend of November 1st that will be with Extra Life. And then our next MomoCon main event will be Memorial Day weekend next year, May 27th through 30th.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being with us,
Yeah.
sharing a few decades of learning, building in the event space and the fandom space. And so,
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
myself and Mike will
Thanks.
see you guys next time on
Thanks.
Beyond the Logo.